everyone. This is Mame, and this is Independent Voice. Thank you again for joining us and welcome. In today's video, I have a distinguished guest that would be talking to us about his own life journey. Ismaël Frédéric FOUAD. Mr. FOUAD is a French national from Ethiopian origin. He obtained his master's degree in political science in Paris. He also obtained various university degrees in computer science, development studies, French literature, and analysis and methodology in economics. For 25 years, Mr. FOUAD has worked with various non-governmental organizations, the United Nations, and the European Union. He had officially been accredited to represent these organizations in different parts of the world: in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, in Africa, Ethiopia, Libya, Ivory Coast, Eritrea, Somalia, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tunisia, Nigeria, in Latin America, Colombia, Haiti, and has extensively traveled in Asia, USA, and Europe. In these countries, Mr. FOUAD had explored, implemented, developed, and managed various types of development and emergency institutional projects benefiting the intervention countries in war-torn societies. Mr. FOUAD has a wide range of management, negotiation, diplomatic, and institutional representation experiences, coupled with a proven excellent knowledge of different cultural and geopolitical contexts. He speaks fluently French, English, Amharic, and Somali languages. Through his long-term international experience and his diversified knowledge, Mr. FOUAD had built a global network. Mr. FOUAD was the first staff member entrusted with the responsibility of implementing the first ethics unit for MSF Paris Group in 2007. These are some of the things to mention from what he has accomplished over the last 30 plus years. And I have the distinguished honor to introduce to you Mr. Ismaël Frédéric FOUAD as he shares his life journey with us and the message for the next generation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ismaël Frédéric FOUAD. Thank you so very much, Ismaël, honestly, for being here. Welcome to Independent Voice. On behalf of myself and everyone that follows Independent Voice, I am absolutely honored to welcome you to our program. I'm so excited to have the opportunity. It is also an honor to be the one to sit back and listen to you sharing this incredible experience and life journey with us. With that said, say something first, how we got to this point that you've agreed to do this within Independent, and then I will go into my first question and we'll take it from there.
So, hello, my dear Mame. I'm first of all very happy that you have me on your medium, Independent Voice. I'm honored. And I'm also humbled with the introduction that you just made. I know I have listened to some of your recordings, but also some of your talks on some other medias where you were interviewed. We have common friends that have spoken about you, and we had common views for our own motherland. And also in the global arena as well, because we're both children of the planet village. As we say, we're not only Ethiopians, but world kids. And so it is from that perspective that I will try to exchange with you and share a few of my God-given, I would say, chance of having traveled around, worked around with various institutions. And that's something that I was really looking forward to. And here we are today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. The honor is mine. I cannot wait to really sit back and also listen to it and reflect back, because I think we all have a lot to learn from what we're about to hear. So to begin this journey, I would like for you to start, maybe look back from where it started, where it began. As a child, who you were, what was your experience like, and then take us through that journey.
Yeah, so now you're getting me into nostalgia. This is a very, very long time ago. Yeah, you see, I came from the same country, Ethiopia, as you, and my life that I'm going to talk about it started from the beginning with some original way of starting life and things that should be, of course, shared with people, but in a delicate manner, because there is not only one view about it, but various. But I'll give my own view. And I came from a mixed family. My father, well, let me put it this way. My father's side, my grandfather was a Somali mixed origin, living in the Redawa. But in his days, he was kind of those enlightened people. He had studied Quran because he was a Muslim, and he excelled in that domain and became a Quranic teacher to start with. And lately he became the equivalent of meaning priest, but in the Muslim religion. So they call it Sheikh. And he was a great Sheikh, well known in the region. He used to travel in those days in the Ogaden region, eastern part of Ethiopia, but also in the northern part of Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, and even up north to Egypt. He had discussed then, in those days, with Al-Azhar University, the equivalent of Harvard in Egypt. It's called Al-Azhar, and he had intermingled with scholars there of Quranic studies. He had gone to Saudi Arabia for pilgrimage in Mecca, Medina, etc. And as any Muslim, because the possibility is there, he was married with 4 women. And that happened because each time he was traveling, to thank him, they were offering him a lady to seal the relationship. It was also a sign of respect, showing him that they respect him for what he was teaching them. Okay. From those 4 women, he got about 24 kids. And one of them was my dad. Okay. And to tell you, the age gap between the kids, the first kid of my grandfather had himself a kid that was the age of my dad. So it gives you the
Oh, wow.
the age gap, you know, almost in one family, there were already 2-3 generations, you see. And like all his kids, they first all studied Quranic studies by obligation. But some of the kids were born far into Ogaden, so completely with Somali families and communities. But my dad's side, with his mom, I think she was the last woman he married to. They were dwelling in Diredawa. And as you know, Diredawa is a cosmopolitan city where you have many kind of communities. First, internal Ethiopian communities, like we used to call them then Otu, but they are Oromos. You had Somalis, of course, Hararis from mainly Harare city, but they are scattered in that region, the eastern part of Ethiopia. And you had also foreigners, French, Greek, Armenians, Turkish, Yemenis. So all these people were living together. And Diredawa was also, by virtue of being a bordering region to Djibouti, but also Somaliland, etc., quite developed in those days. Had already an Alliance Française, a school where they used to teach French. You had Notre Dame, where it was in English, but French also was dominant. And you had also Arabic schools, but Arabic from Arab countries like Egypt, etc. Yes. And so the kids in those days were either going to the Arab schools, English schools, French school, or the public school that was nascent also in those days. It was not as now, but it was nascent. So my dad, because he was turbulent when he was a kid, he was already communicating with all the kids in those various communities. And he really insisted to be registered in the French school, whereas the others went to the Arab schools. He insisted, and it was a real battle apparently, but this is what I was told actually. So he did that lycée. In those days, you had the first cinema in Diredawa, you had Italian ice cream places, you had similar terrace cafes of France, houses where they used to sell juice, and he was acquainted with all this. So he had opened up his mind with the cosmopolitan nature of Diredawa. And very quickly, when he finished the lycée, he was apparently a good student, and they retained him in the lycée so that he teaches the next generation. You see, so he became a teacher in the lycée where he graduated. And one anecdote that I was also told was that although he was a son of Sheikh, very rigorous Islam and everything, he was the first young man who had the first French girlfriend. And so it became a scandal, a big scandal, because him being the son of a sheikh that was known widely, it became very hard for him to continue to live in the Redawa. And ultimately, he just left and came to Addis. Because in those days, if you want promotion, if you want to grow, you had to go to the capital city. Another brother of his, who was from another mother, but they were about the same age. So it happens as well, you see, in the same family. That one also finished the school, and he chose to go to Djibouti. And a third one that used to be also with them in the Redawa, instead of going either to Djibouti or Addis, went to Somalia. So Somalia, northern, which is now called Somaliland, was a British colony, and it had already established universities there. So this third brother went to the University of Amud, it was called like that, in Somaliland. The one who went to Djibouti, because Djibouti in those days was still under the colony of French. And so he joined the Liberation Front of Djibouti when he went to Djibouti. And that, when he came to Addis, because as I described him earlier, he was an open-minded person. So he liked Addis, with the vibe of Addis of those times, with Wube Baraha and all this hot spots downtown of Addis. And very quickly, he made a lot of friends. Addis also was cosmopolitan. There were all kinds of people. There was the Lycée Gebre Mariam as well. And he was noticed very quickly. Because in those days, during Haile Selassie's regime, yes, it was an empire, but at the same time, they had secret services everywhere. They used to call them in Ethiopian, Nechelabash, you know.
Oh, okay.
Not that they were dressed white, but it's as if you cannot know them. They are mixed with the population. If you go to Wube Baraha, there are also some Nechelabash. If you go to a restaurant, there are Nechelabash, etc., etc. Okay, so seeing him intermingling with all kinds of people, Arabs and whites and what have you, they say to this one, might be or a spy or something, we have to interrogate him. And that's how he was interrogated by the then Secret Service office, which used to be called Haile Selassie Liyu Cabinet. It was the special cabinet of Haile Selassie. And in those days, Dad had the chance of learning many languages because of that cosmopolitan city of the Redawa. And through the interrogation, they didn't find anything special. And they were a little bit amazed by his history and the fact that he was speaking all those languages. And so they proposed him that he works with them. You see how things can evolve. So he started working to this very high-ranking office then in Addis as a first clerk. And in those days, between Ethiopia and Israel, there were no formal relationships, no embassy, no consulate, simply because if you wanted petrol and you were linked with Saudi Arabia or all these petrodollar countries, they would not sell the petrol to you if you are linked with Israel. So all African nations didn't have any embassy with Israel. You see? But Ethiopia, because of her history, entertained a secret relationship. Okay. And so every year, they used to send people secretly through various routes, either through Europe or through Turkey, and they used to go to Israel to be trained for that specific office, the Liyu cabinet, this special cabinet of Haile Selassie. And these people used to be trained for the Mossad, by the Mossad, you see, for future spy work or surveillance work or protection work of the kingdom. Okay? So that was the type of chance that he was going to have. What happened in the meantime is that he met with a girl that used to work in that office as well. Mm. They fell in love. But in that kind of office, it is forbidden between people who work within that office to have any kind of relationship by rule, you know, because each one works to spy anyone, including its own co-worker. Oh. They don't trust each other because that was the nature of the office. Mm. But unfortunately, I was already on the way.
Oh, okay.
So you see why I was so slowly bringing the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
So yes, I became the fruit of a love.
The forbidden love?
Forbidden relationship, yeah.
Okay.
And so she had to stop working. And I was brought into life in hiding because they rented a place and I was not born in a hospital.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because you see, he had been told that was forbidden. They wouldn't, of course, condemn them for that, but yeah, they were overpassing the rules, you see. So I was born that way. But on top of that, the problem became more complex because this lady that would become my mother was from Gondar.
Okay.
The region that is called Derg, you know. And apparently her grandfather was a S.
Okay.
Her grandfather, okay. So it was also a clash of religions. You know, he was a son of a sheikh and she was, you know, from a family that was S. And
S is like a priest, right? A priesthood. Okay.
A priest, yes. Yes, sorry, yeah. So even if in Ethiopia there is tolerance between religions, here they had gone too far. You know, it was two top major families with different obediences that had to bring a baby in the middle, and so the marriage was was not possible, I think, because she left the house. I was 6 months old only. But she left because she was missing her family.
She left with you, or she left you behind?
No, behind.
Okay.
Because he was a tough person, he wouldn't let go.
Okay.
So that's how the journey of Mr. Ismaël Frédéric FOUAD started,
Wow.
So I'm not really, I don't know the story, but I was told that he would bring me to the office, and that's how I started growing up, at the beginning alone, and then he had hired a person in the house that used to take care of me while I was a baby. And when I reached 2 years old, I think, he got married to another person.
Okay.
He went to Diredawa, and he made a proper marriage because in that office where he was hired, he was growing up quickly. And so if he wanted to have a position, he better be married.
Oh,
or
have
single.
Some kind of stability.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. That were the requirements,
Okay.
So he got married, got 2 babies, a sister and a brother, and then only he was sent to Israel to be trained by the Mossad for about 2 years. He was absent. When he came back, the marriage couldn't work properly because there was this absence of 2 years and everything. So he divorced and married a 3rd woman.
Okay.
And it is when he married the 3rd woman that he was nominated to Khartoum, to Sudan, as a diplomat.
Okay.
And by then I was 5 years old. I was already going to the lycée because we start early, 3.5 years old. And when he was nominated to Khartoum, I was put in the lycée because the lycée had a boarding school. And the others were kids, so he took them with him. And the new lady didn't have yet any babies yet.
Okay.
So that's the beginning in Addis for me.
Have you met your mom, though, at all through those 5 years? Or
no, because she completely disappeared. You see?
Oh, really?
That's the drama. Yeah, that's the dramatic part, because I never met her up to now. You see, and that maybe it has its own explanation. I had looked for her after, but I will come back to it later. But it never happened, and for him also it was, I think, difficult because she was his first love, actually, and that kind of breakup maybe created a lot of maybe not anger, but broken heart, maybe.
Absolutely.
Voilà. So he never wanted to speak about it neither. So I'm just being transparent about it because it's a past story now, but that's how it started, and it shows also how things can be complex within a given cultural setup in a given country, like an old country like Ethiopia. You see, even if religions coexist, they tolerate each other and everything. When it reaches some limits, it explodes, So that was one case of mine, but in general, there was tolerance in the country.
Right.
Yeah. So, but voila, it happened that way. I was too young to really analyze all this. And then I went to the boarding school of Lycée Gaura Mariam, and I entered another world, completely different. There was discipline. We had to respect certain rules, and there were varieties of things that you were learning on top of the normal studies. You were learning painting, you were learning, of course, sport, picturing with cameras. We were doing theaters and things like that. So you don't have time to think about something else. And your family becomes those with whom you are in the boarding school. And the beauty of it was that because of the OAU in those days, now AU, headquarters was in Addis, many African diplomats were also bringing their kids in the boarding school. Some other Western country kids also were in the boarding school with us. Okay. People coming from the Redawa were also in the boarding with us. People coming from Djibouti were also in the boarding. So it was a mix of Ethiopians and many other nationalities. So we were already in an international arena, you know, and we were discovering the type of faces that we were not used to, languages, accents, even behaviors from the point of view of culture, and it was quite interesting in terms of learning so many things, because on weekends we were even invited in the houses of these people. So you would not only see them as persons, but you will go even in their cultural setup within their house, where you will eat also their food, African food from the West, African food from the East, from the South, some Korean food, some Asian food. So you see, you learn a lot of things, right. And that was exciting for the kid I was, you know, and I grew up with that up until my baccalaureate in lycée. But unfortunately, in the 70s, mid 70s, a little bit earlier, happened the coup, the revolution, you know, and by then we were not really adults, but teenagers. But already we had the style, you know, we were Afro, we were dressed like the same kids that really brought the revolution, you know.
All right, then.
We were a little bit smaller in age, you know. So we didn't understand very sharply what was going on, but being lycée students, we used to read, we were taught about history, we knew about the French Revolution, things like that. So we had a glimpse of what was happening, but what was painful was the violence that came with it, you know, because at the beginning, I remember the song, you know, it was Yalamin Dem. So it was a kind of revolution that came without blood, and it was true. When it came, they just deposed the king and imprisoned many ministers and dignitaries, and that's it. You know, the bloodshed started slowly, maybe a year or two after. You know, when the EPRP and Mason, which were two revolutionary groups as well, because those who took power were the military, but there were also these two groups that had worked hard. The Mason used to be led by people who came from France, who studied in Sorbonne, which is the equivalent of Harvard in France. And the EPRP were more Anglophones, they were from University of Ethiopia, of Addis, but also from England, some coming also from the States and other European countries, And
so Ethiopians that went abroad to study? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
interesting.
Yes. In those days, they were going to
Mm-hmm.
study, but they never remained abroad. They were coming back home.
Okay.
Most of them. Yeah. So that was the case. And when the violence started, our problem in the boarding school started as well, because gradually they imposed what they called the narrate, which is you had to be briefed about the Red Book, the Mao book.
The indoctrination began.
Indoctrination. You had to go to the cafeteria or qabale, which are communes, in Addis, divided in many communes. So where you live, every Sunday you have the obligation to go for the indoctrination, And that we were not concerned because we were in boarding school. Mm. So one day the regime declared that all boarding schools, whether they were international or local, should be closed because it was the kids of the bourgeoisie that were studying there, quote unquote, Mm-hmm. But, when you are in a boarding school, there is a reason. Some, they had family within Addis, but many of us didn't have family in Addis.
Okay.
You see? So when that boarding school closed, then started my real problem, And I had to find a family to go to. So there were some friends of Dad who welcomed me at the beginning that I didn't know very much, but and then I started realizing what was happening, because in the boarding school we were safe. Mm-hmm. We were in heaven, even, I would say,
protected.
Protected, and it was a French property, even if there are agreements with the Ethiopian government. The curriculum is French, the teachers are French, so we were really protected. But when it closed, even if we could go back to school on a daily basis, we were getting out from that comfort zone.
Right. You were exposed.
And be confronted with the real reality of the city and what was happening. And it was at the peak of what was then called the Red Terror and then became the White Terror. And it was really terrifying, because shootings were everywhere. You would see dead cops everywhere. You pass by to go to school. I remember I couldn't eat after having seen such things, because the terror part was showing the dead cops to the people. They just throw them, and no one can pick them up until they decide. So many people in the morning will see those corpses almost on a daily basis. At first I realized what was going on. And second, with the age that we had, teenagers, we were starting to understand, but we were first and foremost traumatized. Okay. We were not ready for this. We read about the French also Red Terror and White Terror. They had the same thing. It was a copy paste, But what you read and you imagine and what you see is completely different. You know, what you see gets you.
Right, because it's real.
It's real, and disgusting, actually, for that age. You know, when you are an adult, okay, you can go to church or go to your family and discuss it out. But when you are at that age and you don't have your parents around, it hits you hard, you know?
Okay.
And you don't talk. To whom are you going to talk even? You know? Voila. So that period was the worst up until today, I think, of my life, you know? And voila, I had to realize that the new regime was a violent one, and I started also to question the integrity of my own dad. You know, saying, how can he, after having worked with the previous regime, just continue with this new regime? In those days, with my mind, okay, he had his own reason, I'm sure. And maybe there was also a national reason also, because the work that they were doing was very specific, and it was not linked to which regime you are. It is linked to the sovereignty of the nation. So whichever government comes, they want you, unless you say, I don't want to work with you. Your work or your connection, what you have undertaken is needed for the protection of the nation, you know. But I wouldn't see it that way. I was young, too young, not yet mature, you know. So I really didn't want to have relation with him because of that. And I started working because I was good at school, so I was teaching kids, going home and teaching. And these kids were diplomat kids, and yeah, it was well paid in those days, you know. I was teaching them maths and physics. And I started also working in my own country. You remember Lion Bar? It's just in front of Biography Theater, you know, the National Theater of Addis.
Okay.
Just across the street, you had this beautiful Italian type of bar where you had underground biliardo, giotoni, and things like that. On top, you had a place where they used to sell cake, Italian cakes, and also ice cream. And they had a terrace, especially. And many people were coming there, professors, the lycée kids, some business people. So it was a vibrant place. Okay. And I was working there, you know, a few hours, and it was good. And I rented one house for my own self, you know, one house, one room.
One room, okay.
Yes, and I became autonomous, you know, at that age.
Wow.
Yeah, and so voila, that was.
What was the transition like from having such a sheltered, like boarding school lifestyle to being completely independent?
First, it was brutal.
I bet.
Very, very brutal. But then the country itself and the city itself was in turmoil. So, you know, you're not different than the others, actually. Everyone was in fear. And even those who welcomed me in their house for a little while, they were not comfortable for me to go to their place. It's just because they respected my dad, but they were not comfortable. Why? Because I was young and they had youngsters, and you're bringing problem maybe to them. You know, people used to hide their kids in the ceiling. you
We've
know?
heard those stories, yeah.
Oh, yes. And me, I lived it. I saw it. And yeah, everyone was fearing everyone. You see? So you're no different. It's violent for you, brutal for you. But then when you see around, everyone is in fear. So you have to cope with the situation.
They didn't know who to trust.
Who? You see? Because the Red Terror, it was the killing of the actually involved people who were against the government, the transition government. And so there were, killings of a button. Okay. But then when the White Terror came, that was the worst part, because it was towards the end of the Red Terror, and many people were imprisoned, those opposition groups, and they were tortured. And the torture was inhumane. So even among those people who didn't do anything and were not involved in anything and who were imprisoned, they will be tortured. So when you were not involved in anything and you are tortured like hell, then you start giving names. And those names that you're giving can be your friend, can be someone you know at school or at work, and that person neither is involved, or maybe he's involved, you don't know. But
people were randomly giving names.
Yeah, because they wanted the torture to stop. Simply, And so you could go in without you knowing why. Someday they will just come to your place and take you. And brutally, not softly, come, you are under custody. No, it's brutal. Yeah, they had this, you remember the Volkswagens, the yellow Volkswagens, Kumbi, they called them, this old hippie Volkswagens.
Okay.
The minibuses, they had the size of a minibus.
Okay.
And they were yellow. I remember even the color, So the noise of the Volkswagen,
Oh, wow.
So when you hear that voice, you start trembling, because these are the people who come and pick people to take them to prison.
Wow.
So yeah, I went in twice in prison. No, 3 times. Not because I have done anything, but there was also curfew. And initially it was very early.
Okay.
Around 6, 7, 8, everything is closed. No bus, no taxi, no nothing. You have to be at home, Yeah. And then they pushed it slowly to midnight. After midnight, they can even shoot at you if they find you in the street.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I was working in Lion Bar, sometimes I was finishing around 10. But I was going to my place by foot, and it was not that far, but it was on top of the hill of Churchill Godana, Churchill Road, in front of the lycée. And 11:30, that's it. They're eager to stop anyone, They stop you and you start arguing. You take out your ID card and everything. Boom, half an hour of discussion. It's midnight. They take you in.
Wow. That's got to be frightening.
You were never secure. You don't feel secure at no time. Daytime, nighttime, never. Weekend, it's obligation to go for the indoctrination. If you don't go, they come and pick you up from the house. And
How did you survive those 3 times, though, that they picked you up? What was it like?
As I told you, the place I found for rental, the room that I rented, was not far from the lycée because I couldn't afford going far. And many lycée students used to live in the surrounding of lycée. And some of them, they were bigger than us in age, older than us, and they would, by obligation, be part of the rounding people at night.
Okay. Wow.
Because they pick up people randomly, they train them a little bit, and then you become a kind of cadre. They call them cadre. So for that night, it is XYZ, and among those people, there were some lycée kids, you know. So the 3 times I was saved by lycée kid.
Wow.
But he couldn't save me in the streets. I had to go in, and it's the next days or the 2 days later that he would do things with the family and things like that. And they made you pay, you know, some fines when you were caught, so-called after the curfew. And yeah.
Wow.
They paid for you and you get out. But when you're not in a safe place. A lycée student, to find yourself with this kind of people, you discover another world.
I can imagine.
No, you're not, how would I put it? You're not
street smart.
safe.
Let's just say that. You're not street smart.
Voila, and you don't feel safe at all. But you have to be smart, you know, laugh with everybody and try to play games, you know. And so it was after the 3rd time that in my mind I said, enough is enough. I have to leave this place, you know. So that's how I started preparing for my departure.
Were you done with school by then?
It was about to. But, you know, to be frank with you, the test for study dies gradually with all this violence, you know. What comes first is
safety.
How to get out of here, you know. And get out of there, it's not that you had a plan, but you hear that the kids of X or Y had gone through Sudan, through Kenya, through Djibouti, and you say, how do they do it? You know, you start wondering, and you don't ask people because no one trusts no one. But me, I had this chance, which was, as I told you earlier, and that was why the beginning was a little bit long. Dad, when he used to be a teacher in Alliance Française, most of the kids that he taught in that school, most of them were working on the railway station, because the railway station used to be called the Franco-Ethiopian railway station, because Djibouti was still French.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You see, now it is called the Djibouti-Ethiopian railway station, but even maybe now it's even that even has died, because at some point the railway was not functioning during Melles's regime, because it had died, you know. But after the Chinese rebuilt it, I think it became only the Ethiopian railway. I don't know, I didn't follow that part of the history, but in those days it was called the Franco-Ethiopian railway station. So all the French speakers were hired there. So all of this knew my dad. And they were not 1, 2, 3. No, all of them, you know. And among these people, you have also the current president of Djibouti, who used to be a student of that.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Among all this young that went through that Alliance Française. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So you see, time is...
Mm-hmm.
Voila. So I prepared first to go to the Redawa,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very easy. Even if, you know, to travel from a city to another, you had to go through Kabale, permission and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I just had to go to the railway station. Near the railway station of Addis, on the right side, you have villas that were built in those days, which were villas for these people. When they come from the Redawa, they rest there. They don't go to hotels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was very modern in those days, you know, stone-built houses. So when they finished their trip from the Redawa to Addis, they were chewing cut there and rest a little bit and then go back. So I was going there and talking to them. I was like their son, you know, because they loved him because he was their teacher. So that's how I went to the Redawa, you know. And then from the Redawa, they organized it, and I went to Djibouti.
Okay.
That's how I went, and I didn't want the help of my dad because, as I told you earlier, I said, how can he not leave this place, you know, with my little mind in those days. Now I understand him. I don't blame him, and I don't have the right even to blame him. That's his choice, you know, but voila, it was that kind of rebellion that was created in me, you know.
Did you know anyone when you went to Djibouti, or your main goal was to just leave the country and then?
First, what it was leaving. Second, of course, there were people, if I really wanted, that I could have approached. But the rebellion, it was the whole family thing, you know, because they knew that Addis was not in good shape in those days. And they could have organized my my extradition from, well, they had the means, you know, but because the regime of Mengistu was feared very much so, no one was daring, you know. Those from Addis who dared, they were taking risk. Yeah, those who sent their kids abroad, they were taking risk. Me, I can die, but my kids should go, you know. That was the sacrifice that they were making, you know. So me, I didn't want to involve anyone. And once I was out, yes, I found a lady that used to come home in those days, with whom I stayed for a few weeks, I think, 2 weeks maybe. But I didn't want to stay. I hated Djibouti. I don't know why. I hated it because it was hot, very hot. It was
too hot, yeah.
And we were not used to that, you know, coming from Addis. And it was still under the colony of French. It was about to be liberated. And the whole system was racial discrimination. We didn't grow up with that kind of separation. Even if I was a fruit of a clash of obedience, with my friends, with the kids, I just grew up free, and we were not even asking who is Oromo or who is Urage or who is...
Had it not been for what was happening politically in the country, would you have left?
Well, in a natural way, because when you are in lycée, when you finish your baccalaureate, you have a scholarship.
Okay.
Automatically, you know. if you succeed, of course. So you go to France, you study, and you come back. That was the course that was set for us.
Okay.
And we were all looking forward to go study and come back.
Interesting. Okay.
That was the whole setup and dream that was broken in those days.
Mm.
And on top of that, the trauma that we went through was, quite frankly, I don't know how we survived, because with the age that we were and what we kind of absorbed, I don't even know how we made it even outside. Because when you go, you want to go, but you go into darkness because you don't know exactly where you're going. You don't know exactly. When it was lycée, you know you're going to Paris or Lyon or whatever. You picture it, you know. And there is money waiting for you, and it's only studies. Here, you don't know, you know. So going was the dream, but the objective and the outcome was darkness, rather. So when you go to Djibouti, first, yeah, it was the heat and all this setup that you were not used to, the racial thing, the discrimination, etc. But also, it was, what am I doing here?
True.
You see? So then I continued through arrangements again to Saudi Arabia, you know, because there were possibilities in those days. And this lady had helped a little bit. And they take you by boat, and you go to Jeddah. You know. There, it was another discovery, because it's the same heat in terms of weather, but it's modern. Even in those days, it was 1979, 80. We were entering the 80s. And yeah, coming from Ethiopia, there it was, you know, big buildings, big roads, big American cars and things like that. You discover another world to which you are not acquainted at all. And then they take you to the place where most of the people from the Reda are, you know, Somalis, Ethiopians, Oromos, whatever. They are there. They were clanic, actually. And that's how you start also a new life there, you know. And yeah, I stayed.
How'd you manage to connect with the person that made the arrangement for you to go to Djibouti?
The lady with whom I was, she was the one who.
You've known her before, or how'd you meet up with her?
She used to come to Addis. You know, from Djibouti, there were women, strong women, who used to be called in those days, maybe you heard it, Sharshari.
Not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's like in West Africa, you heard about the Mama Benzes.
Maybe.
Yeah, Mama Benzes are these women, very strong women, who used to do business between Arab Gulf countries and Africa, and they become rich very quickly, and they use all of them homogeneously by Mercedes-Benzes. That's why they were called Mama Benzes.
Mama Benzes, okay. Voilà. Wow, Mama Benzes. All right then.
But so in our region there, between Djibouti and mainly Ethiopia, but also with Somalia, there were these people who were called Sharshari. It's the equivalent of Mama Benzes, you know. So they were doing business, because in Djibouti you had French products, the French perfume, the French day, and they bring that, and from Addis they bring chat.
Money.
Yes.
Okay.
They were providing for their families.
Mm.
They were clever people. Sometimes they lose also because sometimes because it was contraband.
Mm.
If they are caught, they lose everything, you know.
Interesting.
So, voila.
How long did you stay there?
Djibouti only 15 days.
Oh, yeah.
No, I hated it. Yeah, I hated it.
Where'd you go from there?
Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Ah, okay. That's the big city, huh?
Voila. That's where things will be mind-blowing, and the petrodollar. And it was somehow, for many people, the land of opportunity, like it was in the United States, you know, before. So people were coming from everywhere, Philippines, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Somalia, everywhere, Egypt, Sudan. You could find all nationalities there. Mm-hmm. And they would work in everything. Doctors were coming to do work there. Teachers were coming, house builders, every kind of people were going there. So finding a job was not a problem, even clandestinely. But me, I had this chance of a little bit like that, of having learned many languages, you know, because of lycée, because of him, because of the environment in which I grew up. So I use, of course, to speak very well French. My English was not too bad. I had started speaking Arabic, so you could do something there. Mm-hmm. So I used to work in a consulate, the Moroccan consulate.
Oh, okay. That's a good place to be working at.
In fact, it was by mere chance, because and you will understand later when I will tell you all the secrets, because all this comes with his own package of secrets, you know.
Okay, all right.
So from there, where I stayed a year and a half, I naturally, with the Moroccan consulate, told them I would like to continue my studies, and going to France at this stage, I don't want, because I didn't know what to expect, you know. Mm-hmm. So Morocco was the transition possibility, and they liked me there. So they had facilitated the whole thing, you know, the visa. Even I was welcomed by the family of the consul himself, re-registered because I had my papers of the lycée. Mm-hmm. And that's where I finished my secondary school in Morocco.
Okay.
You see? And that was a very good transition for me, because Morocco also was a very beautiful country, even in those days, you know. It was the 80s, beginning of 80s. It was still Hassan II, the father of the current king, you know. And yeah, it was beautiful. It was free. It was even if it was a kingdom, and yeah, opportunities also were there, and mainly it was near to Europe. Mm-hmm. You see, mm-hmm. So when I joined the school there, I started, of course, having friends and things like that. And when the school was closing, we were going on vacation to Spain, Portugal. Wow. So we were few kilometers away from France. So when I finished my secondary school, I registered university there in Morocco first year. And those with whom I was in school went directly to France. Okay.
So did you go to French school then?
Yes, Morocco is French only. mainly,
Mainly.
and Arabic, of course, but it is mainly, as it was a French colony,
Right.
it's all French. And then the same level as in France, because it used to be a real colony of France, you know, like Algeria, Tunis, all these countries were considered as being part of France, you know, like a region of France even. So yeah, the schooling system, the curriculum is exactly like in France. So me, I registered to university there because I was still fearing without scholarship to go there, you know, to France. So when I registered there, the kids I was with went to France, and the next year they sent me an invitation, and I went to the city where they were in France, you know, because now I had people there with whom I can be and start slowly my life there. And that's how I got to France.
Wow. Finally.
Finally. Yeah. But
one way or another, right? That was the plan.
Yeah, but finally was because everything was set that way when we were a kid. But then this revolution came and disturbed everything, you see?
Right.
That's why we're saying finally. But I could have continued in Morocco. It wouldn't have been a problem. You know? But in here,
exactly,
it was recorded.
That plan was planted there.
Voila, you see, from childhood.
Yeah, you know? that vision was planted there, and that was the final destiny.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So finally I went there. I was in a city called Grenoble in the eastern France. A beautiful city. That's where I started my university studies, where I did first computer science. Then I went on and did computer science applied to medical material. Did biotechnology.
Wow.
And after that, I was ready for work.
Before we go through that step, because I know the work by itself is going to transition us to, I'm sure, a different journey altogether. But, you know, from beginning to where we're at right now, obviously, you can kind of follow this journey, the childhood, how it all starts, how upbringing matters, where we get the culture, the standard, who we are as we get, you know, shaped to being the person we're about to become, all the way back from where our parents come, what they've gone through, who they were, the relationship that they had built, especially in your case, your father having to leave that kind of legacy. You were able to continue to follow that, or continue in that network, in that relationship that he had built to save your life. You were able to say who you were, or, you know, who your father was, and people were able to provide you with the assistance that you needed. They took you in, you know, it was like whatever it is that he had done made those people to want to pass that on to you by taking you in and doing all the good things. You had mentioned one word that I want to touch on before we get into the work, because I think it's going to lead us to an incredible journey. You had mentioned, as you were preparing to leave the country, because the first thing you're thinking about is your safety, right? Because it just did not feel safe. I think a lot of Ethiopians can attest to that, those that have gone through that experience. I don't think there was a single person, whether they're young or they're older, I don't think people were feeling safe at that point. And as you were preparing to find your way out, and you've managed to go through those steps to leave the country before you hit you found yourself in Jeddah, I think. You had mentioned one word, trauma.
Where
was that tucked away as you went to school, your secondary school, completing your university courses, right until you found yourself in France. Schooling is done. You've done all these incredible things, computer science, applied technology, biotech, and all that. I mean, that by itself is a journey, right? Where was that trauma? I mean, what did you do to work through it? Did you just tuck it away, or did you like have to face it and work through it so that you can find yourself in making this kind of decisions? And also maybe talk about whether or not this journey that you had taken from childhood to this point had anything to do with how you were making those decisions.
It's a very interesting question. You know, in this medical domain, your question could be answered by saying, because it was a PTSD, you know, meaning a post-traumatic syndrome. So the thing is, at the very moment when you are going through all these horrible things, you are on a survival mode. Okay? Whether you are coherent, settled, mindful, etc., doesn't matter anymore. It is just survival. So you will do whatever it takes so that you can flee from this thing that had really hit you hard. You know, the survival mode is running away from what is hurting. Okay? How you do it is just, voila, you cope with the situation as it comes. It's not pre-planned. It is not preconceived. It's not even discussed with others. You know, you hate that place of Djibouti, not because you hate Djibouti. It's because there are elements in Djibouti that reminds you what you just left. You see? So you don't want to stay there. And you will see after what will happen. Okay? So the answer is that mainly you are on survival mode. You go away from something and you don't want in your way out things that remind you what you left behind. That's the only survival mode that allowed me to go up to Morocco. But if in those days someone I trust would have sat with me and asked me, maybe I would have burst in tears or collapsed even, you know. But you're there with dignity because that was not the way you were brought up. You were brought up in a very nice environment, and that's why I never criticized my dad. The thing that I spoke about him continuing with the new regime was a kiddish political analysis that I didn't even have the tools for. You know, it was just saying, why? I was just awaking. I was a teenager that was awaking, you know. So I said, how can he continue? But at the end of the day, if today you ask me about my dad, my first answer is that he did what he could.
Right.
And he did it right.
He has.
Voila, you know. What do I know of his feeling about the new regime? I don't know nothing. You know, I was not with him. Maybe himself was not in accordance. I don't know, you know. But voila, it happened so, and I was safe, so he let it go. And I was also like him, you know. When he was kid, I told you he was you know, fast, and myself, I was like him. So he wouldn't dare fighting with me because we had the same character, you know. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, no?
That's what they say.
So no, there is no hard feelings, and there is no bitterness. The trauma was there, and when I will pursue in the narrative, you will be even more amazed, because it hit me hard at a later stage.